Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore their world and prevail against all threats. www.itstactical.com or www.imminentthreatsolutions.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am Brian Black, joined by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about camping essentials in the great outdoors. One of my favorite subjects.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So today we're basically going to address the different types of camping, if you will. I mean, obviously we'll get into what that means. And also go over some systems of gear and equipment that you'll need to kind of take with you depending on your situation.
Yeah.
So
this is what I think of when people say gear, like the get the gear stuff.
Yeah,
it's like
get the gear.
It's your camping gear. It's your like all of these systems and packs and shelters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So first, addressing the types of camping, I guess, is probably where we should start. Of course, there's backpacking. There's ultralight backpacking. There's hiking, there's cross-country hiking. I mean, there's really kind of a plethora of things, but really what that boils down to is being on foot.
Yep.
So that's the way I think about it, meaning, are you on foot underweight? Do you have a pack on?
So you have no other support
Right.
systems, it's just what's on you.
Correct. And that's kind of how I think of it. And then you've got kind of the vehicle-based nature of that, and that includes, like, this is a generic car camping.
Yeah.
You've got glamping in there, which is glorified camping. And then, of course, there's recreational vehicles, which
is not camping. Let's put that out there. You can't bring your house with you to the woods and call it camping.
I completely agree with that statement.
I think a lot of people have that problem, though, is that they associate that with camping, and then they don't do a lot of the same stuff. And so you find there's a big divide, even at campgrounds, between like, oh, those are the RV people. Like, we don't talk to them. So
they hook up water, okay?
Right. And it defeats a lot of what camping is about, like getting in touch with nature. And it's hard to do that when you have a gasoline powered
I kind of agree with that. And, I'm not really throwing shade, so to speak,
No.
on people that want to drive an RV out to the wilderness. They're still getting outside, and there's still a lot of that. But I truly believe, though, camping should be connecting with nature, and I feel that you really need to be sleeping on the ground.
A little bit of roughing it.
A little bit of roughing it, yeah. And I even question the inflatable mattresses and things. Like, you know what I mean? The ones that have a pump that go, and you can
See,
hear
mine's
something.
a hand pump. It's okay.
Agreed.
Depending on what you have. Like you said, with a vehicle, you have more support for extra stuff. So, and glamping is the glorified when you have your folding tables and your carafes of coffee and someone's making pancakes.
And you've got camping silverware. And
yes, exactly. Specific silverware for
specific
your camping
pots
trip.
and pans. And I'm not going to knock that, though, because there's nothing that I've enjoyed more than doing stuff with the Boy Scouts, with my son being involved with that. I have loved, we still camp in tents, but we bring along a trailer. So the trailer's got all the amenities. You've got your stoves in there, so each patrol for the scouts would cook their own meals, and we would do that same thing as adults. And that's where I learned how to make coffee in a percolator and make a good Dutch oven cobbler.
Yeah.
So
sometimes those comforts are necessary, especially after a couple days. It's like, all right, I don't want to rough it anymore. Let me get some regular stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would call scout camping glamping, but at the same time, those boys are really getting in touch with nature, and I really think that's. The scouting organization is one of the few that's out there, along with the Girl Scouts and things like that are actually still promoting that. So
absolutely,
definitely love what they're
any way you get
still.
outdoors, just get outdoors.
Agreed. So let's get into systems. So, and what I mean by systems is that I like to refer to these things basically as an overarching system for each type of thing you're going to need. So, and it'll be easier to understand once I explain it. So, pack system is kind of self-explanatory. That's your pack. That's what you're carrying everything in. And then you've got a shelter system, so that would be like your tent and your ground sheet, things that you would need to put up a tent. And that could, the shelter system would also be like a hammock too. If you were doing hammock camping, same type of thing, all fall within your shelter system. And the reason I'm kind of breaking these into shelters in the way I do this is because I like to list my gear and equipment like this. I'm a big fan of Evernote, and I have all my stuff in Evernote
all
and
sorts of
in
checklists
and that type of thing. I used to use Excel before Evernote came along, and I used to have everything in kind of an Excel database and things like that. And I never really liked it. I always had to have multiple tabs and things like that. So I really like the invention of Evernote for tracking that kind of stuff too. So
Well, and this seems to help that organization by, with the sleep system, when you're focused on, okay, what do I need to sleep? It helps you kind of break down what you actually need versus like, here's just a big list of the stuff I'm taking, and then maybe you forgot something that's like totally essential.
Completely agree. And then, then you've got also your cook system too, which would be, whatever you're using to cook meals with, your burner system, whether it be a jet boil or whether you're even taking MREs and you don't even need something to cook with. It's just, using the heaters that come with the meals. So honestly, though, before we get too much further ahead, I think that, and I know I've read this somewhere before. I really can't quote exactly where I've read this. I think it was in Lighten Up. It was written by Mike Cleland, I think is his name. But anyway, it's Lighten Up is a complete handbook to light and ultralight backpacking or something like that. Phenomenal book, and I learned a ton from that. And even though you don't think that you're ever going to go lightweight backpacking or ultra lightweight backpacking, the philosophy that he talks about, and that we'll get into a little bit within this podcast, is really will kind of help you look at what you're taking in a new light too. And I think it's super beneficial. So, but anyway, the big three, which are pack system, sleep system, and shelter system, are primarily where the biggest part of your weight comes from if you're going to be doing any kind of underfoot camping, meaning that you're taking your house with you, so to speak. So breaking what you're taking into those type of systems will allow you to really kind of analyze where your weight's coming from. And I'm a big advocate of writing down the weights of absolutely everything that you take. I have a little scale that I use to weigh everything, and you've been a testament to me doing that.
And on that gear tasting episode that we did of your prep for Mammoth, you showed on that whiteboard like every single thing, and we were able to trim, a couple pounds out of that, which isn't much, but if you take a look at 50 pounds and you take 2 pounds out of that, that's a significant percentage that you're removing.
Yeah, and that's really what will let you take a look at everything too, is if you list out the weights, and if you subtract something, you recalculate. And it's better to recalculate as a overarching system rather than having to recalculate a whole list. So that's kind of what I mean by some of this too.
Yeah.
So we talked about pack system, shelter system, sleep system, cook system. So clothing system would include everything that you're wearing. That's kind of like your skin out stuff, anything that you're wearing on you, as well as the layers and extra material that you have on you for that. And then you've got kind of a food and water category is how I like to break this one down. So you've got the food you're carrying, which, sometimes there's a significant amount of weight. It depends how many days you're going to be out there. Yeah. And then water is heavy by itself. So depending on the water source where you're going to be, do you need to take a water filter? Do you need to take drops? Are you treating water? That type of thing. Those are all questions that kind of come into play with that. And then you've kind of got this miscellaneous category, which is your DOP kit, so things you need for hygiene. Sometimes you could throw water purification in here, but I'd lump that more into kind of food and water. You've got a headlamp, a map, a compass, things to start a fire with, and then you've got medical equipment. So that's kind of what I refer to as kind of the miscellaneous.
It's funny because like everything you just mentioned, when I go on camping trips, I have a bag that has like that stuff in it. Yeah, it doesn't. It really
so
doesn't.
You've already got a miscellaneous bag.
Yeah, it doesn't organize into some of the other categories. Like med gear, I try to keep on the outside, but for the most part, like your compass, your GPS, all that kind of stuff, I just put it in this one bag. That's kind of my, it's in this bag.
Your possibles bag.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of walked through the systems, I briefly want to touch on what those mean too. So when you're talking about establishing your base weight, which is, what you're going to be hiking with, the base weight constitutes kind of your pack plus your unchangeable items. So the things in that pack that don't change. So the things that do change, I kind of refer to as consumables. So those are things like batteries, things like food, water. Yes, because as you hike, that's going to become less and less. And the best way to describe that, I think, is kind of to use an analogy that I just experienced, which was I went to that Mammoth Sniper Challenge, and they told us, they said, okay, so for years past, they've always let us take this little cooler, and I've only done this event twice, but I have some friends that have been doing this for, I think 5 years now. But they always allow you to take like a little cooler and you can put your food in there for the other day. So meaning you would only have to carry with you the food that you were eating for that day. And then at the end of the day,
Gotcha.
you can kind of resupply from this cooler. But other than that, everything has to be packed and taken with you, along with the gun you're going to be shooting with. So it gets really heavy.
The whole thing.
Yeah, so they said this year we can either take the food like we normally do in a little cooler, or we can take your tent. So my shooting partner and I opted for them to take the tent because the tent will never get lighter.
Right.
With the food, even though you might have to carry all your food as you eat it, that weight actually decreases.
It gives you incentive to eat more food
yes,
as you go. Yeah.
exactly. So that made more sense to us. So
Definitely.
That's kind of why I consider that consumable, because you're eating it. So then your base weight plus your consumables equals your pack weight. And I'm going to try to not get too far into the math on this, but that's really kind of what gives you your pack weight. So anything that's in your pack constitutes that base weight, again, which is the pack and items in it. And then you've got consumables, because consumables are obviously going to be in the pack.
Sure.
But it's a way of looking at those systems in a different light to look at where your weight's coming from. So, and then you've got pack weight plus what you're wearing, and that's your skin out weight. So that's actually what you're hiking underfoot with.
So everything you've got.
Absolutely. Yep. So, and then now that we've kind of gone through the systems, I kind of want to go back and address specifics of those systems and talk through maybe some of our favorite gear and kind of our experience with those systems as well. So, starting at a pack system, I have literally used everything from a massive, it was like 65 or 7,500 cubic liter. I think it's cubic liter, cubic inch. Anyway,
that puts you in like with the RV guys.
Yeah, Mystery Ranch pack that's just massive. That's actually where I started too, which funny enough, that's one of the first packs I bought. Cause like, oh man, this is cool. Cause I was in the military and I wanted to get issued one of those. I never did. So that was like one of my wish list items.
Still
when
had
I got
good
out.
knees.
Yeah, exactly. So meaning it can transport about like 100 to 120 pounds. And I was, not that I carried that much, but I look like a freaking turtle, with my shell walking around. But so that's where I started. And then I've through the years, I've kind of gone through this lightweight backpacking changeover to where I've really been super conscious of everything that I'm taking, and I've been able to cut weight and know what I need and what I don't. My big thing, if I can offer advice to people out there that are camping and doing things like that, when you go camping, let's say you wanted to take everything under the sun, you should, when you get back, this is the best way to do it.
Yep.
Start dividing your stuff up. So take everything out of your pack and say, did I use this? Yes or no? If you used it, put it into one pile. If you didn't use it, put it into another pile. And then out of that pile you didn't use, further divide that up to say, okay, yes, I might not have used this, but would I need it if there was an emergency? Is it mandatory that I take this?
So like a trauma kit.
Exactly. Yeah, so like a medical kit.
You didn't
or
break into
kit.
your trauma kit.
Right.
But that
just
doesn't
because
mean
you
leave
didn't
it
get
at home.
injured doesn't mean you can leave that at home.
Right.
Correct. So really you'd have 3 piles by the end of that adventure that you go on. And the more times that you can do that, the more you'll learn what you can live without and what you need to take. So that's been my experience for, all the years I've been camping and hiking and stuff like that. I've whittled my stuff down pretty light.
Yeah.
Like, at Mammoth when I just went, I got my pack down to just under 40 pounds, I think.
Yeah. Which for taking what you took is a huge
Yeah, I mean, my gun
thing.
weighed 13 pounds.
Right.
So
well, and you have to shrink a lot of that down because you had to factor in the gun weight.
Yep.
And I mean, that's still 40 pounds for how many days were you guys out?
3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Plus, you have to consider the weather too. It was like -2. We didn't know it was going to be that. We thought it was going to be about 15, but still.
Well, summertime you could have taken a lot less.
Absolutely.
Different layers and stuff. But no, I mean, I think that's a good point. Like we had, when we did our first muster, I had packed everything under the sun. Like you said, I remember my favorite item I had.
Until the raccoons got it.
Yeah,
right?
I had a folding shovel in my pack that I was humping, and the walk to Chow was like 1.5 miles. So, you do round trip 3 miles. And I remember when we first got back, you unzip that pack and it was time to take out everything that wasn't like absolutely essential.
Yep.
And it got down to like a water bottle, a notebook, and a spork.
Well, it's funny you say that too about, opening it up and taking everything out. That's another thing to consider too, is how you pack the pack. You really want the stuff that you're going to be using on a regular basis to be up front. or I'm sorry, up top or anywhere you can access it easily. That's kind of a consideration to take into account. And then you really want to put your weight up high on your back too. So you don't want to necessarily put the heaviest items down near the bottom of the pack because that's what specifically sits on your hips when you're adjusting a pack. Which, by the way, when you do put on a pack, the weight should sit on your hips and it should have a waist strap or a hip belt to kind of help carry that load.
Distribute that.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick a pack like as your go-to pack for, camping in general, not specifically like ultralight or backpacking, do you have like one that you kind of gravitate like, oh, I'm probably going to take this pack?
I'll tell you what, man, my old standby is the old military issue Alice pack.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, as funny as that sounds, it weighs about 6 pounds with the frame. It's not light whatsoever. But just the thing is bomb-proof.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like my old reliable, So that would be my go-to, I guess. How about you?
So I kind of swapped around for a bit, and I've got LBT's 3-day pack, which I really like, and I try as much as I can to not overpack. So I find what I've done is get a smaller pack to force me to pack less stuff.
Yeah.
And if I can't overfill it, then it can't get too heavy. So I bounce back and forth. If I'm going like car camping, I have like a little Eagle backpack I like, and then I have a TAD, like a light speed pack that I like. And those are around, well, the Eagle one's like 500 cubic inches. The other one's like 1,000 or 1,100. So that kind of forces me to make it smaller.
Nice. The kind of lightweight backpack that I have that I love is not made anymore. It was made by Go Light. It's like a Jam 50, I think is what it's called. And it's just super lightweight, very dependable. And there is now a new company, I think, that the previous founder of Go Light is now on. And I cannot remember the name.
Is it similar in construction?
Yeah, they're making basically lightweight backpacks, and they're not the only ones making them. I mean, there's people making crazy super ultralight weight backpacks that are like Cuban fiber and stuff. It's
Weird.
insane. The ultralight backpacking community is a strange breed. Yeah. But they have helped me learn a hell of a lot, so can't knock them.
Even like you said in the beginning, like the philosophy of it helps. Just to, even if you're going car camping, it helps to think about that kind of stuff.
Well, the philosophy is that you're cutting your toothbrush in half.
Yeah.
That's where your weight savings is coming from sometimes, is, doing stuff like that.
Sometimes you have to cut things off.
Yeah, repackaging is huge, and that's kind of the big gist of the lightweight backpacking community, and I've learned that through the years. As I've kind of whittled down my DOP kit into smaller and smaller pieces, I have found smaller and smaller containers to repackage my stuff in. So I've gone as far as putting toothpaste on a piece of tin foil and letting it dry out and creating toothpaste dots and putting those in a little Ziploc bag.
That's better than a whole tube.
I chew one of those up and brush my teeth
There
with
you
it,
go.
So yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, there's so many great lessons learned though, because it makes you kind of look at all your equipment in a new light. So one thing, just as an example, when I went to Mammoth, I was taking a pair of gloves and counting ounces, and the deal is ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. So pack light, freeze at night, that type of thing. So when I was getting my gloves, I remember looking at my gloves, going, "What are all these straps for?" And I started cutting off straps, and you'll find that you'll do that. You'll start cutting pieces of your gear off that are not needed. It's just crazy. So. Yeah, I mean, I did. I saved a few ounces by cutting straps and buckles off a pair of gloves.
I've cut strap lengths, like on packs.
Yep,
like, I'm never going to extend this strap to this far. I'm going to do about this, cut it right here.
Yep.
Fuse it.
Absolutely. So, and then, the tent, like we talked about, hammock. I like Eno hammocks. The Eno Nest is a hammock that I really like a lot.
It's got a really small footprint.
Yeah, it does. And I keep one of those in my truck, honestly, just for a kind of a quick, throw-up thing if I ever get stuck somewhere and had to throw up a hammock real quick. And then the ground sheet, or what you would put under the tent, is kind of counted in this whole shelter system. And then moving on to the sleep system, obviously it would be your sleeping bag. That's kind of the main focus of this area. And I've really kind of liked 2 different sleeping bags in my time. In the last couple of years, I've floated between a Mountain Hardwear Phantom 32 bag and a Nemo Salsa 15. So I actually took that 15 when it got to -2, and I threw on a ton of layers and a ton of clothes.
But it worked?
But it did work.
That's great.
So, yeah. was happy to have had that and not mistakenly taken my 35 and said, I can deal with 15.
Yeah, that's another thing to bring up is the temperature ratings of sleeping bags. We have an article that will list it. It's kind of like the magic behind the temperature ratings and what they really mean, because a lot of people, I think, will buy a 32-degree bag and say, oh, it'll last me. But when it gets down to 32, it can be, depending on who your manufacturer is, it means you'll survive. It doesn't mean you'll be warm and toasty. It just means you'll be alive.
Yes, exactly. When they wake you up in the morning, you will be alive. You won't be excited about it, but you'll be alive. But I'm always been an advocate of sleeping in clothes too. A lot of people say, oh, you should sleep naked. It keeps you warmer. That's a bunch of hooey. Don't believe that. Sleep in your clothes.
Yeah. Well, and also like things that you might have to do during the middle of the night. You know,
if you're cold, that is.
Yeah, being naked is not a good thing if you have to unzip the tent and deal with something happening outside your tent, and you're a little vulnerable.
That's true. And then in the sleep system, you've also got your ground pad and a pillow. And I've gone through a lot of different ground pads over the years. So, I started with like the Thermarest inflatable one, that was just super heavy. And I've gone through the ones that are skeletonized that just do not keep you warm at all. So, the purpose of a ground pad is to act as an insulative layer between the ground and you, because the ground will literally suck the warmth right out of you. Same thing in a hammock, too. It's kind of important to mention that. If you're sleeping in a hammock and you don't put anything insulative underneath your back in the hammock or wherever you sleep on your side, stomach, whatever, you can get zapped the same way. Just because you're not on the ground doesn't mean that wind coming under the hammock's not going to zap your body heat out from under you too. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, it's important.
I wonder if there's anything out there that would show, like let's say where you guys were at Mammoth with your negative temperatures, if you would be warmer in a hammock just because you're elevated not from the ground, or if maybe the geothermal temperature is still lower than what it would be in the air.
It's tough. I'm sure what would play into that is like a R value rating.
Sure.
So ground pads, the good ground pads have an R value rating, and that's, I'm not sure, I've never really gotten fully into R ratings, but I know that that's the insulative value that they have. So meaning like on a ridge rest, which is like a roll-up Thermarest mat, which is one of the lightest mats you can kind of get out there, just by adding kind of a reflective silverish layer to it, they increase the R value of it because it's more insulative.
Oh, okay.
So
that's a good ground pad.
Yeah,
I picked that up on your recommendation. It's
great, man. It's a little bulky because you have to roll it, but at the same time, it's super lightweight, and it's. Yes, there's lighter weight ones out there, but, what are you giving up for that?
Well, and I think that brings up a good point with the weight and things like that, is there are some things that are just kind of like a worth it item. So, yes, it's going to be bulkier. Yes, it's going to be heavier, but it's just worth it to take something like that because you're just more comfortable.
I agree. Absolutely. And then, pillows, I've gone through everything from creating my own pillow. So this is a funny story. I tried to get super lightweight on my pillow for a while. I probably camped like this for probably 2 years straight. No, just, on trips that I would go on. But so I took a USPS Tyvek sack, or like a shipping.
Yeah, like a shipping envelope.
Yeah, they used to, I don't know if they do anymore. I'm not sure if they still have Tyvek envelopes or not. But so I took one of those, and actually Peter, one of our contributors, wrote an article on it. Or no, I think I helped with it, but I can't remember. But he kind of came up with the original idea, I think. But anyway, he kind of sewed a piece of paracord around it and basically made a little tie-off type thing. So he turned it into a drawstring bag, basically. Yeah. And Tyvek is super lightweight. Yeah. And basically what I did is I took Ziploc bags, like gallon Ziploc bags, and inflated them and put them into that Tyvek sack and pulled the drawstring, and that was my pillow for a while. So
anyway, it comfortable? It doesn't sound comfortable.
Well, for a while I was waking up because I would lose the air in my Ziploc, so then I had to double bag it.
Double bag and inflate later in the night.
But anyway, I have since found the miracle pillow. It's Sea to Summit makes it. It's called the Aero Pillow, and I super love it. I super love it. It's expensive. It's like $40, but it's very much worth it in my opinion. It's very lightweight, packs down super small, and it's got a kind of a two-way valve on it. So when you inflate it by blowing into it, the air doesn't come back out when you take another breath. Yeah. So
makes it much easier to deal with.
It's kind of nice. And it's also got a dump valve, so the two-way valve doubles as not only, not allowing air to escape, but then you open a valve, the same valve a different way, and you can let out all the air.
So you don't have to sit and wait for it to deflate.
Yeah, it's
I like
cool.
that.
Kind of cool. So, and then within that sleep system, you've also got bivvies too. So bivvy is another way to camp. Not only do you have kind of your tent that you have, but a bivvy is kind of another way to camp too. So what that is basically like a cocoon for your sleeping bag. So it's got the same materials, so to speak, as a tent would have that, don't allow the weather into your environment, but it's very small and almost the same size as your sleeping bag. So you actually kind of get into it within your sleeping bag, and it kind of has something that will basically form around your face to, leave you room to breathe.
But still shelter.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like a lightweight option for shelter too.
Yeah.
And we really didn't get into tents too much, but there's so many brands and varieties of tents out there. I keep coming back to Nemo tents. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I've kind of gone back and forth from. I've got an OB2P tent from them. So it kind of sounds like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
It does.
But then there's also another tent. I'll put it in the article intel too, because I've done a couple reviews on their tents, but obviously they've become staples for me almost with tents. And
well, and how many times have you used that Nemo tent? I mean,
quite a bit.
Right, and so I hear a lot of people talk about like, I can just go down to Walmart and pick up a Coleman tent, and they're like $25, and that's true, and I've had them, and I don't think I've ever gotten more than like 2 good uses out of a Coleman tent before.
So why would you say that is though?
Because it's just not. It doesn't have the features that are necessary, I think, in a lot of good tents, which is like the seams are well sealed. Mm-hmm. The material is a lot more water repellent. And I mean, even with stuff like Scotchgard, these tents they're a little flimsy, but also like you're getting a lot bigger of a footprint with the same amount of space, and it's heavier. You're having worse materials. And so it's kind of like if you buy 3 of the Coleman tents, you could have bought a better tent to start out with.
I agree. And the big thing for me is the seams being sealed. Like that's a huge thing to look for. And that would be my biggest recommendation if you're looking at tents. Buy something that's quality that has seams that are sealed, meaning they've taped over the seams and that water's not going to come in. Because anytime you put a stitch in material, yes, the material itself is inherently waterproof or water resistant.
But you just poked a
hole in there, and that thread isn't waterproof. So eventually, over time, water is going to get in through the seams. Yep. So that's kind of an important consideration there. And then kind of moving on to cook system, we talked a little bit about jet boils versus MREs. MREs are kind of meals ready to eat. And it's, that came from the military, but now there's so many commercial variations of those now that you can get them pretty much at every... I think any kind of sporting goods store probably has a version of MREs
somewhat,
now. Yeah. And they've all got a heater in there that you just add water to, and that can heat up your entrees.
I think they're great, and I like them for like nostalgic purposes too. Of like, when I was a kid, we used to eat them and things like that. But nowadays, with the newer stuff that's come out, like some of the Mountain House meals and things like that, I think taste-wise, it definitely gives it a run for its money.
Oh, I agree. I think that it absolutely does. But I'm a big fan of MREs too, though. I'm one of those sick, twisted individuals that actually likes MREs.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, I say that, and then all of the packs that I have, like in the vehicle and everywhere else, I have an MRE in there.
Right.
So
Exactly.
Still have them.
Yeah, I mean, the compromise is then carrying around a stove with you to boil water with to make your meal. So that's kind of what this cook system is all about. You've got whatever you're cooking with, and it's always good to have a little mini Bic backup lighter in case the starter on your stove doesn't work. You could always light the burner with that. And, for things like car camping, you're talking about like a dual burner system to percolate some coffee on. And the smallest, you're talking about fuel tabs or like little S-bit stoves or something to heat up with. So I think the Jetboil is probably my favorite stove, that's kind of that size that you'd need to boil water with. And I like it because I can use the cup to drink out of too.
Sure.
So what I like to do is I purely use the cup to boil water with, but I'll also kind of make coffee in it depending on what happens. You just have to wash it out. So
yeah. Well, and the Jetboil is nice too because of the way that it connects to the stove implement. In that, like, I have an MSR stove and it's great, but you kind of have to balance the the whatever you're cooking on, you have to balance it onto the stove, and the jet boil is kind of like sealed one container.
Agreed. And then kind of moving on, you got clothing system, which we talked a little bit about layers and things like that. But the main thing to remember when you're talking about clothing in the great outdoors is cotton's rotten.
Yep.
That's the biggest thing. Avoid cotton socks for sure. They will hold moisture, cause blisters, all of the above. It's just
all bad.
It's terrible. Nothing good can come of cotton
Yeah.
when you're outside hiking or camping. So just avoid it at all costs. And then I really recommend, some of the synthetics that are out there. Wool is amazing. If you can find wool clothing, it will dry out if it's wet, depending on the environment, obviously. But I really like it for its antimicrobial purposes too.
Well,
so.
and good merino wool is not itchy. I think
Right.
wool gets a bad rap for being itchy, and that like if all you've ever felt in wool is like your grandma's sweater, then that's not what you should base this off of.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels great, and like you said, it's very quick to dry, not as smelly as some other
Yeah.
fabrics.
So, for instance, meaning I can do a multi-day hike with 2 pairs of socks, provided they're not getting drenched. And I will take one pair off and I'll hang them on the back of my pack and let them dry as I walk, and put on a new pair. That type of thing. So they're great for that, meaning that over multiple days they won't stink. They won't. They don't hold stink like a pair of other synthetic socks will. So. I love socks from Smart Wool, Darn Tough Vermont.
Those are
Those are
great.
my 2 go-to brands for socks. So if you buy wool in any one of those brands for socks, you can't go wrong. So, and then boots, I keep coming back to my favorite pair of boots, which are Loa Renegades.
Yep.
They're leather lined, which is counter to what a lot of people think boots should be.
But it's so comfortable.
Yeah, I love them.
Yeah.
Is that what you're rocking too?
After you had originally gotten yours in, I had a chance to take a look at them, and I went with the leather line too. It's just so comfortable, and I get blisters at the drop of a hat. So this is the one boot that doesn't do that to me, and it's just a really nice boot. I've got one of those the Super Feet inserts in it.
I do too. I have the green Super Feet.
I'm using green too, and that helps tremendously.
Agreed.
So yeah, they're
I mean,
run.
I've been wearing those since 2011, I think. So, going on 7 years now.
Yeah.
And I am on my second pair.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've climbed a couple 14ers. I've gone on multiple
I was gonna
trips.
say a lot of activity in them.
I've done a lot in those boots.
Yeah.
And they're still kicking on my second pair. So, and I don't think I'm quite at the point of replacing them yet. I haven't done my due diligence and really logged mileage on them, which I really should be doing. But I kind of go on feel a lot too with shoes.
Well,
and look at the soles and the tread.
Yeah, something that people bring up a lot is Gore-Tex and footwear and stuff, and like we've talked about before, you'd rather do a sock change if it gets wet than to have to deal with Gore-Tex when it gets hot or it traps moisture in.
Well, that's my big thing is that a lot of those things that block out water also don't allow water to escape. And yes, I know Gore-Tex kind of creates a barrier that allows vapor to escape. That's what it's designed to do. But for some reason in footwear, it's just counterintuitive in my opinion. I've never had good luck with that type of footwear before, so I keep coming back to my old standby leather footwear. Call me old school, but... And then we kind of talked about food already. The 2 things that I wanted to mention real quick about food is you've got dehydrated and freeze-dried. So the big difference between that is dehydrated is about, 90 to 95% of the moisture is removed versus 98 to 99% in freeze-dried. So freeze-dried has more moisture removed, so therefore it lasts longer. So it can have a longer shelf life.
And that doesn't sound like a lot of difference, but we did that outdoor meal shootout article, and without looking at it in depth, I think dehydrated meals kind of came toward the top, and I think that's because they probably retain a little bit more of their flavor with that moisture.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because they, it might not last as long, but it might provide a better tasting meal.
Yeah. So some examples of dehydrated is a Good to Go. That's a great brand of food that I like a lot. And then freeze dried, you have Mountain House, which is hit or miss on me personally. I like some Mountain House meals, but then I also really hate some Mountain House meals.
Yep.
Paleo Meals to Go is also freeze dried, and I'm kind of the same way, I guess, with them. I have my staples with their brand too. So yeah, it's really a personal preference. I mean, backpacking meals, you just have to try a lot for yourself and find out what you like and what gives you the right caloric content, because when you're really kind of out there in the elements putting out, you really have to replenish calories.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big thing.
Well, and with taste, it comes down to like there are people out there that like the omelet MRE. Like,
yeah, I'm not a big fan of that one. And then the miscellaneous category, like we talked about DOP kit and kind of reducing that type of stuff. I've gone from carrying toilet paper to just carrying wipes. That's been kind of a big thing for me, a change that I've made. You know, and again, that's through looking at what I've had when I came back. You know, I came back with a whole roll of toilet paper, and then I like took a half roll of toilet paper.
Yeah.
I came back with a quarter roll. You know, it's like just it's process of elimination.
knowing what you're going to use.
Yeah. Headlamps, I used to use a little Petzl E-light, and I had a run-in with a bobcat where I almost got mauled, and it wasn't enough light for me, put it that way. And started carrying around a Princeton Tech light. I'm a big fan of their stuff.
They're great.
I really, really like those lights. And then map and compass, I'm a big fan of knowing how to navigate with the map and compass. It's a perishable skill, one that you really need to keep up on. And we can talk about navigation in a future episode too, because I think that's a great topic to discuss and talk. You know, kind of compare the GPS phenomenon with that, and you know that electronics will eventually fail on you. So you should know how to do things as a backup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with along those same lines, fire starting, same type of deal. You know, you should know how to start a fire and
if your lighter isn't working.
carry the things to facilitate that.
Yep.
And I will say, you know, along those lighter lines, even if you have a lighter, it can still be a pain to start a fire even with a lighter. You still have to kind of have a fundamental understanding of how to look at tinder, kindling, and fuel and use those the right way to start a fire.
And have way more than you think you need.
Yes, I agree with that too. And then kind of along the medical lines, you know, carry a first aid kit, carry a boo-boo kit, carry a trauma kit. You never know what's going to happen, so you don't necessarily need to carry a whole med bag, but have something with you. Yeah,
and the more remote you get, the more your chances are of not being able to get help quickly.
Absolutely. So I think that really kind of covers everything I wanted to talk about. I think the only thing I didn't really mention is that, you know, when you get into lightweight and ultra lightweight, the weight that you're talking about there, you know, I mentioned I was 40 pounds and, you know, on going on that Mammoth Sniper Challenge, but lightweight is technically considered, you know, 25 pounds or so. And then ultra lightweight is kind of 15 pounds or less. So
that is ultra light.
Just to give you an idea on what some people are hiking around there with. So, yeah, kind of a crazy phenomenon there. So, one thing I wanted to mention is that we're going to start doing gear tasting. We're already doing it, but it's going to be every Tuesday. So tune in every Tuesday for a new episode of Gear Tasting Radio. And use the pound tag Gear Tasting on any social media network, and we'll start kind of getting some of those questions here. We've already been doing that with our video series, but I'm going to start kind of getting into some questions here eventually too with future episodes of Gear Tasting Radio, so we can field some questions here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, you know, if you like what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to Gear Tasting Radio on iTunes and, you know, leave a review and let us know what you think, and, you know, rate and review us there.
That helps tremendously on iTunes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you later next Tuesday.